everybody. Welcome to Hunting Illinois podcast. With us today, we have Curtis.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Curtis. And then we have Dan and Jason.
Hello, hello.
Hi. Today, we're just going to kind of do a rundown of the deer season that was.
Yeah.
So we kind of did our preliminary season. We did our kind of our goals, what we wanted to achieve this past year. And so now we're just going to kind of cover where we're at as hunters and kind of just go over also kind of a rundown of the state update as well.
Sure.
So I think we're going to start there. So Dan, you want to go over kind of how the season went across the state?
Yeah, I can do that. So Illinois DNR typically releases their harvest numbers. As of right now, they have only published the firearms. So this will be the first segment of the firearm season as well as the second. So really only those 7 days. So this won't have any of the archery, any of the youth firearm, any of the other seasons like CWD and stuff like that. But
Sure.
I think there's some pretty interesting trends to at least kind of highlight. So Illinois this year, Illinois hunters took 76,850 deer during this 7-day season, which is a little bit of a bump up from years past. In 2021, it was about 70,000. So it's a nice bump of 5 or 6,000 harvest.
Wow.
So where it seemed like the majority of those came from was that second season. So second season is normally about 20 to 21 for the past few years, where this year it was about 24 to 25,000 were harvested during that second part of the 7-day season. So it was a pretty good productive season. I myself had a firearm tag. I can't recall. Did either of you guys draw a tag this year?
Nope.
Not here.
Yeah. So
I didn't apply, so that doesn't.
Oh, that.
I'll be applying next year, though. I saw plenty of deer from far away, so
Yeah.
I'll be getting a gun tag next year.
Yeah, it's always there's just always a level of confidence, and I don't know, especially in Illinois, you just don't get a ton of opportunity to walk around and hunt with a firearm. So when you get that opportunity, it's pretty cool. So I do recommend putting in for it. But I think it was a pretty productive season this year. The weather was a little bit wonky. I know personally the first weekend we focused on trying to fill my wife's tag, so we kind of spent quite a few days doing that, able to harvest a nice little buck for her. So got him in the freezer, and then second season it was windier than I've never ever hunted in wind like that. It was to the point, we have all been kind of sharing intel, quote unquote, like we like to do. Hey, I saw this here, share pictures and stories, just so we're all trying to do the same thing, and we like to see each other harvest just as much as ourselves.
Right.
And so you guys have been kind of focusing on a very specific part of this piece of property that I almost want to call like just the center of buck bedding I've ever seen.
Mhm.
The hunting public, I think they had a spot they called the buck nest or
Yeah.
something to
Yep,
that
yep.
effect. But it's kind of a similar concept. And every time one of us was in there, we'd see mature buck after mature buck. I know you had just several encounters in there.
Yeah, I had four hunts. It wasn't 4 days in a row. It was 3 days in a row. I saw mature bucks, and then maybe 3 days after that, I saw another mature buck. It was 5 sits in a row
That's insane.
that I saw different mature bucks running around. I mean, it was an insane part of the season. For
And
sure.
even some mentors. We took some new hunters out to this spot. That was probably right around rut, I would say, kind of mid-November.
second weekend of November. Yep.
And saw quite a bit of buck activity. So we kind of had this area highlighted as a very concentrated buck bedding area. Bucks are utilizing it. There's scrapes and rubs everywhere. We even found a couple dead bucks that were probably, one may have been wounded, one looked like it was been there since probably summer or something, but bucks were in this area. And so I wanted to really focus on hunting this area, but the wind was just made it impossible. This little area happens to be kind of an oxbow, and if you've taken some of our webinars, especially like the strategy deer stand placement type stuff, we talk a lot about oxbows and how commonly these mature bucks and different deer will utilize these areas for bedding. It does require a pretty, I don't know how to describe it, but a very specific wind direction. And we just didn't have that the majority of the weekend. But what that big wind did, because that was the weekend, it was 30 to 40 on average. Gusts were 55 to 60.
Wow.
I wasn't going to get in a tree. So I just did a lot of spot and stalking. I walked around. I think I ended up covering like 8 miles that day. Ended up shooting a little buck there towards right at the end of light. So I was able to fill my tag. But that's the nice thing about these windy days when you get a firearm, is you can use some other techniques that you really don't get the opportunity to utilize in Illinois specifically. For many people, deer hunting in the Midwest is you go sit in that tree and you just sit. So like you said, it's cool to see deer far off and to be able to actually make a plan and make a play on them. So a good season
That
overall, though.
saying about handing you lemons or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you got handed, that was the time you had to hunt, but you got
Exactly. Yep.
handed a pretty rough hand with being really windy. So look at the light at the end of the tunnel, and it opened up a new hunting style. With
Exactly.
that much wind, I did now this is not deer, so I'm going to step away from deer and talk about ducks, but only for a minute, and then we'll get back to deer. So don't leave. But I was out duck hunting and it got super windy, and it was the first time I had hunted in gusts that are like sustained of 35 plus, and they couldn't see us. Like all hiding
Oh,
went out the
sure.
window, and it was, I don't know at what level it hits that, because at 25-mile-per-hour winds you still have to hide pretty good, but at some point when you get towards 40, all of a sudden it's all bets are off, and I don't know if the wind is like in their eyes, but if you just imagine everything is moving. So we just stopped hiding. We were just standing up right in the brush, and ducks are landing right on us, where earlier in the day, they were flaring at the slightest thing wrong. So even beyond deer, you get those windy conditions, and critters just their senses aren't meant to deal with it just like ours. So it's,
Right.
it's
Right.
an opportunity.
And I forget if I can pull up the link to the study, I'll drop it in the show notes. But there was a University of Georgia study out of the Warnell. I think it was just came out a few months ago. I remember seeing it in, I think, the National Deer Alliance newsletter. But they looked at buck activity during windy conditions, and one of the big common myths, I myself am victim of it too. The wind picks up, everyone, it's not even worth hunting. There, nothing's going to be moving. In reality, they still are moving, and they're moving just as much, but instead of moving in an area that's this big, all that movement may be concentrated in a much smaller area. So you can still have a lot of success on windy days, just like Curtis described with waterfowl, like I found with deer. So don't be afraid that if it is windy, just kind of utilize that wind to your advantage.
Mhm.
I think it's huge. But I know you had some really good hunts. You saw quite a bit of rutting activity early
Mhm.
on. You want to talk a little bit about those hunts?
Sure. Yeah, and I've told many stories already through the podcast, through our different updates and stuff. So this year was the first time I ever did a spot and stalk on the ground because it was windy out, and that's
Mhm.
how I got the only doe I got this season, which
With
was
a bow too on
yeah,
the
with a
ground.
bow on the
Yeah.
ground. And again, it was a gusty wind out, and they couldn't see me or hear me coming up, and I was using the wind the right way and walked right up on them. Well, I had to hide behind a tree for an hour, and then eventually, and then I walked right up on them.
But
But
that brings up another good point, though, is you don't have to be completely silent when you're doing these things. So many people think, oh, every sound you make matters. And to some extent it does. But a lot of these sounds, like you just walk, that's natural. Things are always out there moving around.
yeah,
And so you really have a lot more, I think, opportunity than people give credit for. And I think your hunt explains that, I mean, to a T.
yeah.
An hour with deer at 30 yards.
Yeah. I mean, they never knew I was
Never
there. And
knew,
then
yeah.
when I did make noise, that actually drew them to me because
Yeah.
they were curious to be like, hey, what's that noise over there? And they
I've
walked
been
right
here
over.
for 30 minutes or an
Yeah.
hour. There's nothing to be worried about over there.
Yeah.
But something's moving. I'm gonna go check it out.
It's
Yeah.
so weird to have a deer walk right at you and like, hey, what's that over there? Not
Do
have any alarm at all and
the
just be
bob
like,
head weave.
yeah. So that happened, and that was pretty amazing to watch and to accomplish. And then throughout rutting coming on, so I think I saw with the mentee, I had one on the ground that I just happened to pick the right log. Honestly,
That was-
we use the same tenets that we teach in our how to hunt rut class, which was get on a bedding area, be on the south or be on the wind side of a bedding area where the wind's blowing across the bedding
Yep.
area and into your face, and then the bucks will run along and try to smell that wind, and that's where we sat at. And then a buck came up the ridge right where we were at, where there was a like a gully, and it walked right up that right at the end of our log, and we had a shot at about 20 yards right at the end of the log. So saw a buck there, and then
Was there much scrapes in that area?
there was when
Yeah.
we walked around to see, my mentee missed, but we walked around to try to see where the buck went, and then we were able to scout for like the first time in that area. I kind of took him to a brand new area that I hadn't hunted yet,
Yeah.
just because I liked the way that the habitat looked.
Sure.
So then when we started walking around, that buck was about ready to go walk scrape line. I mean, there was scrapes on scrapes on scrapes, and there was a defined trail going down that ridge that we just kept coming across more and more buck sign. So we definitely picked the right ridge to just plop down at. And then the next day we just took that same equation, applied to a different ridge with similar habitat, and then my other mentee had a shot at a mature buck as well. And again, they missed as well. So guys, make sure you guys are target practicing. Make sure you know how to use your
That's a
equipment.
good learning point right there. Yeah. for all the work you put into hunting, driving down 3 hours away, spending all the time sitting out there, you got to put the time in practicing, because that was proof right there. All that time
Hmm.
was wasted, just weren't sighted in, weren't ready to
Yep.
shoot. Both of those shots were under 20 yards. That should have been 2 deer in 2 days. And, not getting down on them, it's a lesson
Right,
to
right.
Yeah.
learn for sure. But now everybody out there listening, learn it before it happens to you. Learn it from other folks. Spend 5 times more. 5 times more time practicing than you think you're going to be hunting, because it's just there's no excuse. And when the time comes, there's no way to replicate it. There's no way to get that back. It's over.
No. And that also comes back on us as mentors. Like we're learning as well. And the first guy, I had them come down and shoot my equipment, and because the first fellow was going to use my bow, and then the other fellow was just going to sit with us. And then he's like, "Well, I want to go and hunt as well." I'm like, "Well, you have to get equipment because I only have one bow you can borrow." So then he said he would get it. And the first guy, I give him the benefit of the doubt, honestly, for missing, because he fell asleep and I woke him up and there was a deer 20 yards. It was the first deer
And
he's
not
ever
just
going to
a
shoot
deer,
at.
a buck.
Yeah,
A big buck.
the biggest buck I've ever had within 20 yards of me. I'll be honest with you. It was a huge freaking deer. So, but that guy, I give him it's buck fever. What are you going to do? I mean, even a high trained hunter
Yeah.
person wouldn't be able to make that shot half the time. They woke up in a dead sleep and turn around and shoot at a big buck.
Yeah.
The other
It's
fella,
possible he hit something too, because I did
yeah,
look at the shot line and there was some brush that was close. And just like you say, if he's so focused on the deer, it's so easy to miss a
Yeah.
twig or a stick right in front of you. And who knows?
And we ended up, when we were trying to look for blood and stuff on the way back after I don't know, we probably spent an hour and a half, 2 hours
yeah, it was 2 hours of
looking for
around.
any sign.
Yeah.
Finally, on the way back, as we're getting ready to leave, we luckily find one of the white fletchings that came off the bolt. And
Mhm.
it was pretty, in my opinion, pretty obvious that it was quite high was the shot. So I think what Curtis kind of hinted at there probably is the case. Is hit a little something, knocked off that fletching. And the good thing is that fletching was white, so it was pretty easy to tell there it didn't go through an animal, didn't get any blood on it.
Mhm.
But obviously we looked for blood for several hours. I think we had 5 or 6 people out there, because I had a mentor that day, you had a few, so it was
Yeah, and
yeah.
Curtis was around too. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we had a bunch of folks walking around trying to look for blood. So I give him the benefit of the doubt. The second fella, definitely told him make sure if he does come with his own equipment to practice and sight it in. And he said that he did. He said he took it to Cabela's. He said he shot in his backyard, and I took his word for it. But our due diligence as mentees as well, you got to take them to the range and have them shoot whatever equipment they're shooting that day in front of us to make sure that they're on target. Because I took his equipment to the range and it was hitting the dirt before it got to the target. It was completely
So he
off.
had no chance.
No
Yeah.
chance of hitting an animal with that
Especially with
equipment.
archery, there's just
Yeah.
so,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
much that you're already playing a game where the odds are against you big time. So if you got your equipment's working against you, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And even after all the practice, things get weird out there. I'll kind of, tell a little story. I had a mentored hunt. It was probably December, January. But anyway, ground blind had a deer come in literally at 4 yards.
Mhm.
4 yards. Who? I don't. Any of you guys practice with your bow at 4 or 5 yards?
No.
Chances are you have no idea where that bow is going to shoot, especially depending on the setup you have. Normal trajectory of an arrow, obviously it's going to go up and then come down. Well, in that case, his arrow didn't even have a chance to do the climb, and so it was significantly low. Ended up recovering the deer, no issue. But those are even some other things to think about, that just because it's a very close shot, it can still be tough, and that arrow still might not go where you think, just because, again, the natural flight of an arrow is kind of this upward trajectory and to come back down. And if that arrow doesn't have time to make that climb, then you're going to be substantially lower. Luckily, still got mostly, it was kind of quartering away, kind of nicked one lung, got the liver, but we were able to at least recover it. So again, practice.
Yeah. And then
4 yards, you could almost just like touch it with it.
Yeah.
And, it's like spearing at that point.
yeah, and then some cool activity I saw. Saw a buck locked down on a doe chasing her around.
Oh, that was in the middle of the field, wasn't it?
That was in the middle of the
That's
field.
cool.
I was sitting there. I was me in a tree stand. So I saw bucks in tree stands. I think it's the only buck I saw in a tree stand this year. Everything else was on the ground.
I didn't climb a tree stand a single time this year. That's a
Wow.
first for me. Yeah.
So I saw a buck. It looked like they're playing soccer. I've described this before in other podcasts, but I saw a flash in the field. I wasn't on the field. I was about probably 60 yards into the woods, but I could still see the field pretty well. And so there, I couldn't shoot the field. So if they were in the field, I wouldn't be able to have any shots at all that way. But the buck and doe came running around, and I could see him cutting in front of her, and kind of as if they had a soccer ball in front of him, and he was kind of cutting her off and stuff. And then they ran to some thick stuff, bedded down 80 yards away, and I sat there and watched them. Tried calling a little bit. He was not interested at all.
It's so hard to pull him off alive, Joe.
Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, he popped his head up a little bit
He's
once
like,
in a
"What's
while,
that?" All right.
and then like nothing there. And then so I tried to get aggressive. I had to go somewhere, so it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and so I was like, I'll go walk up on it. And I thought they had left. Like,
Yeah, because I remember you texted us. You were like, "Yeah, I haven't seen him in probably an hour and a half."
Yeah, they bedded down. I'm still learning myself. I am a tree stand hunter from Pennsylvania, where I sit in a tree stand and I do not move. So I am learning myself, and so I went walking up with no stealth involved at all. The wind was perfect. I could have been much more stealthier, but I was like, let's go see
You
if
just
they're
assumed
there.
they were gone.
Yeah, I'm just going to see if I can see where they're at or whatever, get an idea of how they bedded down. And then I got within 20 yards, and they bust out of there, run across the field, and again, another big mature buck, big old Illinois deer run around here, man. So that was a learning experience. Could have been stealthy. Could have got there and then called, and then, after moving. And so if that would have gotten the buck to entice to come out, that's what I was kicking myself for. That would have been the plan, but that did not happen. I mean, besides that, saw some big bucks feeding around the edges of fields at dusk, but no chance of shooting those at all, and some does running around. But a lot of deer activity. I'm gonna just hit back on the goal that I had this year, which was hunt less, and I did do that.
Hunt less, but more focused.
Hunt less, using the wind, picking my spots depending on the wind direction specifically, and not going if it's a bad wind day. And then, so I did that, and I got some hunting done in mid-October, and then a lot in early November. Dad came out, so I hunted 5 days in a row. But then after the first 2 weeks of November, the house work kind of was piling up or whatever.
Yeah,
and
just chores.
Chores. Your relationship with your wife.
The honey-do list gets long, doesn't it?
So priorities took over. I really didn't get out much after the first couple weeks in November. I didn't do any late season hunting, and it's just so ironic because in Pennsylvania, the gun season in PA runs the from after Thanksgiving is 2 weeks of buck season, and then it's doe season till January 15th. And then so growing up, that was all I hunted. I barely hunted archery growing up, so I'm so used to hunting late season. Not doing it at all. It's just so weird to me anymore. But barely got out after that.
Sure.
But
I had some decent late season success. Not myself, but with mentors. Obviously, I kind of talked about that one story, but we had, probably been a week and a half ago now at this point, fairly recently, very late season. But we were out at a piece of public Kickapoo state recreation area, and it was probably 4 o'clock, and it was again one of these hunts that it's hard to describe how cool it is when you are literally surrounded by deer. I know I've showed you the video, and I'll send a video that we can kind of put on this podcast just to illustrate the point. But, when this first doe stepped out, we're like, oh, okay, she's still 150 yards away. Really don't have much to worry about. We're just kind of sitting there watching her. All of a sudden, I slowly look to my left, and out of the corner of the blind, there's a head at like 20 yards. And within the next, I don't know, probably 15 minutes or so, we had 4 does surrounding the ground blind, all within 10 yards, to the point that we could never get a shot. Because I was like, if you get a shot, you can try, but chances are one of the other does is going to catch you drawing. But finally, after literally 45 minutes of these deer in front of us, within bow range, finally made a nice little turn, gave us a nice easy shot, and nice quick harvest. Didn't even have to track it. Can't argue with that. It's fun to watch them fall.
Oh my gosh. We got to give kudos to the management done at Kickapoo.
Yes.
And that program they have right now. So that's going to be a lottery program that they have. They have specific sites, specific blinds that you have to be in the campground they have there, where it's overrun with deer, as you said. Every time you've gone there, there's video that shows like 15 to 20 deer, if not more.
When I was out there a few years ago, literally one blind, I had, I don't know, probably 30 does in the field in front of us. It's just,
we have video of that too. But I mean, it's needed. The management is needed there, and if we could apply that into other places around the state, I think is definitely a successful model.
Definitely
to model after.
Yeah, we need more of those, because it's just a win-win-win. The place in question, like Kickapoo, gets to handle some of its wildlife management issues in a way that's completely free to them. They're not paying anybody to do this. It's also generating money for conservation, but then also the opportunity that it provides for a lot of hunters, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the lottery, if you're a first time drawer, you have increased odds.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Yep, and the way it's kind of divided is obviously it's not just for one age group, so they actually do allocate half the blinds or half the hunts because they'll use multiple blinds for multiple weeks. When you get drawn, you get 5 days is kind of your quote unquote season out there.
Mhm.
But they try to divide it pretty evenly, so half will be awarded for youth hunts and half will be awarded to new adult hunters. So it's kind of divided up that way. But again, like you said, if you or haven't bought a license for 3 consecutive years, that's when they kind of qualify you as a new hunter.
Mhm.
Once you hit that third license, then you kind of move out of that new classification.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
and
but
it's
a great controlled way to get
Oh
the hunt
yeah.
at a place where you are probably pretty likely to see something, especially early on. I mentored there at Kickapoo towards the end, and the one bad thing about having set blinds is towards the end, a lot of the deer maybe have seen
Yeah.
something happen there that was questionable. So we unfortunately sat for a long time and never saw anything, but we had some good conversations, and it was definitely not time wasted, but definitely need more. That model is so awesome, and I know there's other places in Illinois that have too many deer and they're
Yeah.
wondering what to do about it. Boom, let's get together, let's talk, mentored hunt, make some people happy, feel good story, and engage with the community. A lot of these new hunters are folks that historically they're not in the outdoors. The outdoors are for everybody, but we know hunting has largely become a single demographic, and we're trying to change that. And these mentored hunts are great ways to get somebody involved in a controlled way and hopefully get them where they're going to see something, which, if nothing else, that builds confidence to go out and do it next year on their own.
You bet.
mhm.
I mean, I was just talking to one of the human dimensions analysts here. What I find very interesting, if you look at the average age of the Illinois hunter, it's almost over 58 right now. Back in 2000, it was like 46. So you can just see we're just naturally, it's an aging population over, and eventually we're going to hit that inflection point where it just
Mhm.
That almost qualifies for Medicaid.
getting close. Yeah. So opportunities like this, when you come across them. So if you've never heard of the Kickapoo Hunt, if you follow us on Facebook or our newsletter, when that application comes out next year, you'll be aware of it. So definitely, if you're interested in something like that, just make sure to follow us on all our pages, and you'll be updated with any information on hunts like that. But cool model. I know we all had a lot of fun with it.
Mhm.
You hunted it quite a bit last year,
Yeah.
with and the year before actually. So it's a really neat model, really cool. So just kind of keep an eye on. And there's lots of hunts like this, not necessarily that are classified as mentored hunts, but some of these what I call like supplementary opportunities, right? So county land. I know a
Mhm.
lot of the counties near us, especially McLean County, the normal Bloomington area, a lot of their park districts have now started to implement their own urban archery program. And so just because it's not a DNR site doesn't mean you can't hunt there. So definitely it's still worth looking into some of these counties. And this is the time to start doing it, is in the off season, start having these conversations with those land managers or whoever, makes the
Mhm.
decisions for that piece of property, and ask what the process is, ask, questions. Cause I know at the McLean County one, again, it's a lottery because there's more interest than they have spots. And so it is a lottery, but it's fairly inexpensive to enter, and chances are if you get drawn, you're going to have a good hunt. You're going to see lots of deer.
Yeah, I mean, any place that we can utilize land that's already owned by a public entity
Mhm.
to use for the public in new ways is, I think, extremely important, and is, I think, a new possible way instead of going at providing access to Illinois residents with like was it like an axe versus a scalpel, like
Yeah.
people like to make it safe and to make it the proper way of managing the property. People are willing to jump through whatever hoops you're going to put out there for them because the need is there,
Mhm.
and the wildlife's there to be used. So, figuring out the ways that we can get the public on these lands, we're willing to negotiate and figure out exactly
Sure. Yeah.
what type of lottery system, what type of line system we need to set up to safely get in there and get some opportunities.
And just because an entity or an agency or an organization doesn't list that hunting is allowed, I know I hunted. I'll just I won't say the name of them, but a few places around the St. Louis metro area in Missouri. So this was not on the Illinois side. This was in the Missouri side. But there's a few of the county and city parcels of land that do not have administrative rules that says you cannot legally hunt. They don't promote that you can hunt there, but
Hmm.
they cannot tell you you cannot. And so there are instances like that. So just because it's not listed on their website as like an activity that's allowed, it still may be worth a call because they still may have, like you said, some kind of procedure or some kind of process for an urban archery deer hunt.
Hmm.
And I see these urban archery hunts just continuing to grow and grow as the urban sprawl happens. We take more of their landscape. Deer can thrive in suburban settings if there's some kind of forested area nearby, and it's going to just continue.
The most interesting example of this that I know of firsthand is the neighborhood my wife grew up in, outside of Cleveland, Ohio. She lives in North Royalton area, which is south of Ohio, south of Cleveland. And there was times when I was in Maine hunting with my uncle, where the deer population is like zero point 0.2 per mile.
Oh yeah.
And it was over Thanksgiving break, and she sends me a text of a 9-pointer on a sidewalk. And she's like, how's it going out there? And I'm like, you stink. So she was with her family in Cleveland, but they actually opened up her neighborhood, which is really interesting. I mean, it is, imagine just like kind of your big cookie cutter houses in a
Yep.
neighborhood with some forest in between them, and they work
And
with,
those developments are becoming very common.
yeah. But they worked with Ohio DNR. They have 2 stands in the woods there that you have to go through, I think even classes and things to apply for this. So they have you go through a
They made
training.
it do like a competency check.
Yeah, so they have all the hoops you can possibly think of to have someone jump through to safely hunt an area. They go through it, and they have 2 stands in this neighborhood now that you
Wow.
can harvest animals out of folks' backyard because the HOA allowed it,
Sure.
and they worked with the DNR to figure it out.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
So if you're
it's
a land manager, need to contact us if you've got too many deer, or not. It extends beyond deer. I
Yes,
mean,
it
any
does.
kind of
Yeah.
hunting, trapping, fishing. Like, there's people out there looking to do it. So if you've got an area where you've got critters that might be at the population level where they're causing problems, talk to us and let's get something started. Because yeah, we can find a safe way to solve this problem, and also, find a way for a whole bunch of people to have fun in the process, and get them engaged in the whole conservation mechanism. And it's a win-win-win,
It is.
so
The interest is
keep
there.
going.
The interest
Oh,
is
yeah.
there.
For
Mhm.
sure. How many people applied? I know it's grown each year.
Yeah, so this year it was a little lower than last year. So DNR is the one who has to submit the press release to basically send out the application. We kind of build the application internally, like the system, and then DNR has to get it approved. So there's a process. So this year, unfortunately, there wasn't a very long time between application opening and deadline. I think it was only a week and a half or 2 weeks, where last year it was, probably 3 to 4 weeks, maybe upwards of a month. That's kind of what they try, but obviously this year just things happen. But historically, it's about 120 to 140 people apply, so it's quite popular, and that's only, let's see, there's 3 blinds for 4 seasons, so 12 spots.
Hmm.
So there's quite a bit of interest in it for sure.
Mhm.
For sure.
And again, I mean, we were talking. Curtis hunted with an individual in the morning. I hunted with him in the afternoon. He drove 3 hours,
Mhm.
3 hours to come
And
home.
was ecstatic to do it.
Ecstatic,
And
yeah.
even though we didn't see a deer within, I don't know what you guys saw.
We,
but
we saw it they were surrounding the truck when we got back to the parking lot. But
That's a bummer.
yeah, so we didn't have a deer within 100 yards of the blind. He drove 6 hours round trip we started before daylight, so
Yeah.
that tells you what time. And he was ecstatic. He loved every minute of it, and he sent us a really nice email thanking us for it. And I was like, no, I thought you were going to be mad.
I know, I felt
You out
bad,
there,
yeah.
you didn't see nothing, but yeah, just fun time in the woods, and he knew he had a chance, and that's enough to make it a good time.
Yep, if you're in the game,
Mhm.
that's all that matters.
Yeah, it's awesome. The majority of new hunters really have that it's a good day out in the field better
Yes.
than a day at home vibe about them, and I feed off of that. I love it.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. I like you feed off it. Yeah,
Mhm.
well said. Yeah. 'Cause
So how's everybody else's? So that was Kickapoo Hunt. That was my
Mhm.
season. Dan, you kind of mentioned a little bit about how you did. Curtis, did you get out deer hunt at all this year?
Yeah, it was a weird deer season for me because normally I'm very, like, I don't want to say anti-buck hunter, but I'm just like, I just want to get into deer hunting and get done as quick as possible. And I don't. It was probably like Dan talked about, just the buck nest that we found and all the buck activity, and there's new rubs, and we're all seeing bucks, and
We saw
I,
more bucks than does. I mean, every time
Yeah.
we're out
yeah,
there, one of us
yeah.
we'd be texting back and forth after the hunt. Oh yeah, I saw 2 bucks. Oh, I saw 4. Saw no one saw a doe ever.
No, if I tallied it up, it was at least 2 to 1,
Yeah.
and probably closer to 3 to 1 bucks to does, which is fun. That makes
Mhm.
hunting fun. When you have a healthy buck to doe ratio, you see so many more interactions that you never see. Bucks don't fight or spar if every single buck has 20 does. There's
Right.
no reason to be competitive, but yeah, it was fun. So there was new rubs, new scrapes showing up every day, and so I just kind of, even though I wanted to still be like, if it's a brown, it's down type. I just kind of started buck hunting by it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Whatever. I guess that was a different kind of buck fever, but
The
um,
opportunity was there, man. They're all over the place. It's like might as well try to get one of these big guys.
I know. But then
Yeah,
I wound up with nothing.
yeah.
Season's over. I did fire one shot. I shot over a doe's back, which was it was my mistake. It was normally I like to get to an area and kind of mentally look around and decide where's my 20-yard circle and get that all figured out. And I did that. I had sat down, but then as it got closer to dark and I was able to move, I kind of did a crawl about 15 or 20 yards, and it kind of changed my whole perspective. And then
Oh,
I saw a deer out that was in the weeds that before would have been just over 20 yards, and instead it was under 20 yards, right over her back. So I'll take a clean miss over
you bet.
a hit that's not lethal any day. But that was the extent of my drawing. I did get picked out a time or two because this was the first year where I really hunted without a ground blind from the ground extensively. And wow, that's hard.
It is
I
hard.
mean, it is nice to be so mobile, but you have to be a statue at all times.
Hmm.
Because I remember the very first time I went out, it's before daylight, and now the last year I spent a lot of time in my double bull blind, right? So I could get in there, I could open snacks, I could look at my
Hmm.
phone, I could check the scores, see what's going on. But here I am, just barely moving in my backpack before shooting time, and a deer blowing it up in front of me, and I'm like, wow, this is a different level of being still and quiet
Yeah.
when you're on the ground. So learned a lot there, saw a lot of deer. I mean, there was one day, I think I texted you guys, I saw like 9 different bucks and like 4 different does, and in one, and none of them were ever in range. I never drew on any of them, but just seeing that amount of activity keeps you
It
happy
does.
and keeps you coming back. So it was a fun season, even though my freezer sits empty, other than some ducks, and we're gonna add some small game to that here soon. We got some really fun mentored hunts for squirrels coming up.
Yeah, we've
So
got quite a few lined up
everybody,
left.
yeah, we're gonna make some videos about that, and it's gonna be we're not gonna have empty freezers after those, I'm
You bet.
hoping. So try to remedy that. But it was a fun season. Saw a lot of deer moving. We found the buck nest and really kind of mapped that place out really well. I mean, I feel like now we have a really good plan of attack
We do.
moving
Yeah.
forward for like future years. But as you guys know, everything can change from one year to the next. So one of the reasons that place was so good, I think, is it had that huge grass field that was cutting it off from the rest of the property.
And
So
they
the
would
only
never
way,
leave that field. I mean,
Yeah.
no, the
oh,
only way you could even get back there to that little, soon to be Oxbow area is you had to walk through 168 yards, because I mapped it on Huntsman, of grass taller than your head. So to get back there, and that's after walking, I don't know, it depends on where you park, but at least half to 3/4 of a
yeah,
mile just
yeah,
to get
easily.
there. So
Yeah, what I love about that spot is we're not the only people who know about it.
No.
Early on in I think September or very early October, we went out there scouting around. I went to go out there and hang a camera up where I thought I'd be able to see some deer moving through there, and I walked through that field. And when I got to the end of it, I was like, man, no one's ever gonna walk through that. And then as soon as I come out of the field into the woods, I pop my head under a branch, stand up, and I look, and there's a camera already pointing right at me. I'm like, son of a gun! Like, yep, anyone.
Yep.
There's if you're there, someone else is probably there too.
100%.
was that right where I put my camera? Or did you ever see my camera?
No, I never saw where we actually put it up at. We gotta get over there and check it out.
There was another one kind of right behind you that I found on during gun season. I
Yeah.
kind of gave it a nice wave.
Yeah,
So
I
I
know.
think that was the guy that I bumped into out there. 'Cause
yeah,
yeah, I walked all the way back there, like, and that was when the parking lot was closed. So it was like a mile walk, and I did a roundabout to try to avoid everybody because there was only one person there that I didn't know where they were. And somehow, right down there, we wound up running into each other at a deer that we were both like basically drawing on, which was just crazy.
that is crazy.
That is
But
nuts.
I kind of want to highlight that story a little bit more because, so many people are, I don't want to say scared, but just reluctant to kind of share intel with other hunters. And
Hmm.
we learned a lot about that spot. And I'm sure he did as well, just because Curtis and him ran into each other, started chatting a little bit, shared, what they've been seeing, what we've been seeing, and you just learn that much more about the area. So always talk to people.
Yes, and also this scenario was kind of unique in that there's so many bucks out there that
That's
none of
valid.
us
Yep.
felt like we were shorting anyone
Yep.
or felt encroached upon because there was a wealth
was
of riches
insane.
out there
Yeah.
at that point. We're like, oh yeah, you want to try to get bucks? We want to get bucks too. They're all over here. Let's go
Go
get them.
sit there.
Yeah.
We'll just circle this area, have 5 guys. That way, one of us should get
Yeah.
shot.
Yep.
But no, it was a good season.
Hmm.
It was fun.
So what are we looking forward to now?
I'm looking forward to, honestly, spring turkey. Obviously, we still got some small game hunting to do. That'll kind of finish out January and kind of the first couple weeks of February, and then that's when I'm going to really start thinking about spring turkey quite heavily. I drew a second season tag, so have a decent tag. My wife drew a fourth season. I know you drew a tag as well.
I must be third. I think we have people that we know is
I'm
every
third.
season. You're third.
I thought you were first, Jason.
Might be
You're
first
not.
then.
You might be.
I gotta double check. I know I got one.
I got mine in the mail yesterday, by the way. So
I'm getting
if you're
today.
listening,
I got
this will
mine in the
probably be
mail,
yours.
too.
Cool.
Yeah, mine. Katie said it's coming today, so
Oh,
it should
nice.
be in the mail today.
Can feel the ticks crawling on me now.
You bet.
Oh man, yes.
I tell you what, I'm excited though. I'm ready for warm weather, turkeys gobbling, and some crappie biting.
Yeah, that sounds
I'm
good.
not thinking about that stuff yet. We still got a lot of winter left to
Yeah.
go,
Yep.
small game. I mean, yeah, deer hunting, it was fun because we saw a lot of stuff, but also you're left with this empty void that we've already talked about, which is in my freezer. And so hopefully we fix that a little bit with small game. I'm looking forward to that, and also hopefully getting out and doing some trapping because we
Yes.
found some beaver sign there on some of the public lands that we hunt, and we looked up on the hunter fact sheet, and trapping is allowed. So I think we're going to hit that up and hopefully make some videos that we'll be able to share with y'all. But hopefully we'll get out and get after some beaver and mink, and who knows what else we can find out there.
The beaver sign out there is quite prominent, so I think we'll have a decent.
Yep, and we just had our trapping webinar, and that's up on YouTube right
Yep,
now.
yep.
And then we have a workshop coming up.
February 4th, right?
I think so.
Yep.
Yep,
February
February 4th. That one's going to be all about calling coyotes and basically coyote hunting strategies. And it's going to be fun. We're going to go on a couple simulated hunts. So we're not going to bring any firearms, but we are going to bring the callers and go out to a few choice locations and start them up. And who knows, we might call something in, we might not. But it should be a good time. We're
It'll
at
be
least going
fun,
to give
yeah.
everybody all the info they need to find out what calling coyotes is all about and see if it's something they might be interested in trying themselves.
Yeah, and that's for like existing hunters as well.
Oh,
if,
yeah,
if you've never
yeah.
gotten into coyote hunting and you're interested in it, come check it out. It doesn't have to just be a intro type of thing
Right.
for anyone.
Yeah, this one really won't be an intro. I mean, we'll talk about some basic things, but it's really, like Curtis said, going to focus on the act of doing it rather than just kind of the cerebral regulations and that kind of thing. So it'll be
The
Textbooks.
webinar
Exactly.
we did, that was definitely intro. So if
Yeah.
you're just starting out, the webinar is a great place to kind of see fur bear hunting and trapping from kind of a gross level. And then we're going to have some more specific webinars and workshops here as we go that'll be more advanced. But the webinar is pretty intro level, but the workshop's going to be all the way up to current hunters and even experts. Come on out and call with us, and who knows, maybe we'll call in some cool stuff.
We might.
Hmm.
There's a lot of coyotes at that because that's at Des Plaines State Fish and Wildlife Area. Just in case we didn't mention that, it does start at 1 p.m. and runs till about 5:30. It's kind of a tentative ending time. Because if we're, seeing a bunch of coyotes, we're getting a bunch of responses. We may just hang out and enjoy it, get some good video, get some photos, just watch them. It's cool seeing those critters come into calls. Quite cool.
Yeah, sure. Anytime you get a chance to see like that whole suite of animals, the fur bearers, they're largely nocturnal. We don't get a chance to see them. Just think, we all see deer probably day in, day out.
Yep.
Turkeys, squirrels, rabbits. These things are like old hat. We know there's coyotes and foxes and raccoons and all these, and mink and beaver. We know they're all out there, but just think back how many times you get to see them in the wild.
I saw one coyote this year. That's it.
I saw a beaver opening weekend of archery season.
Did you?
Yeah, I climbed up the hill of that ridge over there by the oxbow.
So where we're going to trap. That's a good sign.
Yeah, I saw it climbing up. I looked over. I'm like, what the heck is that? I'm like, it's really long. I'm like, oh, this is its tail. Okay,
cool.
Yeah, I thought it was a groundhog. I'm like, no, man,
that's a good sign.
Yep, coming off the river.
Hey, I like it.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, anything else you guys want to add on about this past season?
I don't think so. We'll kind of touch base on, upland waterfowl as kind of the weeks progress. We really just kind of wanted to focus on deer since that obviously just ended on the 15th. And waterfowl for the most part's closed, especially ducks, but there's still quite a bit of goose hunting. And I know we're actually taking a mentor out on Friday to try to chase some goose. We got a couple of mentees coming down, so geese are still active, and we're starting to see them in quite a big numbers. It finally took really the past 3 or 4 weeks is when we really started to see the big flocks of geese, but they're starting to show up in pretty good numbers. I know, Curtis, when you were out at Kickapoo on those mentored deer hunts, we both heard speckled-belly geese, a couple snow goose flocks. So
yeah, a lot of snows, a lot of white fronts moving, which, when you hear those, the geese are moving. Because if it's just Canada's, you don't know. Are those residents or the birds moving? But yeah, like you said, they've been moving. And another thing we don't want to forget about is the snow goose conservation season, which it's not that far away. I've seen a lot of geese moving. I know we've got a lot of snows to the south of us, so who knows? It's all weather dependent, but coming up here in the next 2 to 4 weeks, we might start to get some snows coming back through. And that's one thing that it's really hard to do by yourself unless you're jump shooting, because you're talking ginormous decoy spreads.
Yeah, thousands.
Yeah, so this is one thing. Like, I like to do everything by myself, but snow goose is one thing. If you're going to bite the bullet and get a guide, snow goose is probably a good thing to do it, just because it's not practical for a normal person to have 5,000 snow goose decoys to do it once or twice a year, right? But don't forget about that coming up. For those of you that haven't fired enough shells through your shotgun, need to heat that barrel up. It's not that far away.
And I'll tell you what, the prices are fairly reasonable. I actually called an outfitter last week. I'm trying to schedule a personal, and we'll invite you guys as well once we kind of solidify a date and stuff. But it was like $100 a day. I mean, that's really not that bad for 6 hours.
Especially if you're on them.
Guided hunt. Yeah.
If you're on them, that's well worth it.
I mean, I did it once in Kentucky. It's been probably a decade. We ended up shooting like 50-something geese in a matter of literally minutes. Yeah. It was minutes of shooting, hours of picking up carcasses and cleaning and stuff. So you can really come home with a lot of meat for the freezer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we got that conference in Kansas. We might be hitting it just about right. That northwestern Missouri corridor by Squaw Creek there. It's world class. But we'll see what the weather brings. That's a little early potentially, but we'll see.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a really good point. And one thing I do want to highlight is the cool thing about the conservation snow goose season is you can use electronic collars. We were just talking about, our coyote calling workshop. Most people use an e-collar for those. And so if you're interested in, predator hunting and then maybe some snow goose, you can use the same collar. I know the one we bought, Fox Pro, that's kind of the personal one I have. I think you have a Fox Pro as well, Curtis. That's a different model.
Mine's a Primos Alpha.
Oh, okay.
It's a little different.
Did that come with the vocalizations already on it, or did you have to?
Yeah, no, there's quite a few.
Yeah.
I don't even remember how many, but yeah, it's got snow goose. It's got all kinds of stuff you can't even use.
Right.
Turkey and well, you were actually saying you can technically use electronic collars for deer. Not that anyone ever would. I'm not
correct.
Sure
I
would.
Burp. Burp.
There you go.
Like wait 20 minutes. Burp.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, that
not for turkey, but for deer. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's a good caller too. I think all the callers out there that I've seen, they're all of similar quality. Some are louder than others. Some have more vocalizations or another, but any of them you find out there all seem to work pretty good. And I think it's
Yeah,
pretty standard. They almost all come with at least snow goose on there since it's so popular for snow goose. So I'd be surprised if you could find one without them.
sure. Yeah.
Cool.
And the nice thing, you don't have to buy an e-collar. When I first started doing snow goose as well as predator hunting, coyote, I used a Bluetooth speaker in my phone.
Oh, there you go.
You don't have to use, an expensive made for hunting thing. You can kind of develop your own. Especially these days, Bluetooth speakers are relatively cheap and can get pretty loud.
Mm-hmm.
But
For sure. And I still think, I mean, your mouth calls are a better way to go if you can work them. Like, not a better in terms of easier, but better in terms of not scaring away game. Because some critters will sort of key in on that electronic caller and learn that it's just something's not right.
it's
It's
got
too
very
persistent,
repeating. Yeah.
it's too loud. You can kind of hear like the metallic speaker-ish sort of sound. So they definitely work, but if you're good on a mouth collar and you've got the diaphragm muscles to do that all day, you're probably going to have a better call-in rate than a e-collar.
And you'll spend $10 instead of 200.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, I guess we can go on to critter trivia.
Yeah.
So the past two podcasts that we put out have been about falconry, and they've done really well, which is awesome to see the falconry community or people interested in falconry coming out and listening to the podcast and checking it out. So we're going to base it off that. So in those podcasts, we described how to get into falconry, and you're allowed to start out with two species of falcon or hawk.
Oh, when you're kind of still in that apprentice.
Yes, the apprentice stage.
Yep.
When you're getting into it, they actually have levels in which you can which birds you're allowed to use. So, what are the two species of bird that you can use when getting into falconry?
It's a good question. I like that one. Yeah.
So there you go. So that was one that we definitely talked about and covered in those podcasts.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And yeah, definitely just a whole field that I never really I knew
gosh,
existed, but
yeah.
never looked into, and it was
and
so
I
interesting.
found out after doing that podcast, I was kind of talking to my mom one evening. She's like, "Oh, how's work going?" I told her about the falcon. Oh, did you know my uncle was a falconer? And now I've got all
really?
these pictures of him back in the 80s and 90s doing falconry out in New Mexico. So apparently, it's more popular than I thought.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but cool stuff. If you haven't listened to those two, or I would say watch the second one, just because they do pull out the birds. And,
Yeah.
you get to see. It's cool. Very cool.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, we'll check you guys out next time, and safe hunting.
Yeah. See you in the woods.
Bye, Curtis.
Nice. I like it.